first annual mountain climbing lecture. What do you think about that title? Can we do this every year? Wow, what an amazing crowd. When I sent out the first email about this, I got responses from all over the world, from alumni, former faculty and staff, and they said, I can't be there. Can you capture it live by video? And so we said, yeah. And then somebody else said, well, can you live stream it? So a shout out to the team back here and up here. And you know, they're not going to just be videoing Andy talking. They're going to actually have the slides up so that people can see it. They're going to do a really top-notch job. So I'm going to introduce the speaker. My name's Jim Wohlpart. I am the provost here, and I'm deeply honored to be a part of this institution and to be able to introduce tonight's speaker. But before I do that, everyone knows that you can't do something like this on your own. And there are two people I want to introduce before I introduce Andy. And that's his wife, Yi, and his cousin, John. I want you both to stand. This is truly a team effort. Our speaker tonight, Andy Anderson, is the John Deere Faculty Fellow in the Management Program. But wait a minute, Andy, you told me you'd never taught in the John Deere Auditorium. Is that true? Yeah. He's never taught here. Until tonight, he's not lectured in this room. He has taken classes here, though, so that's great. He's in the College of Business Administration and teaches courses in global supply chain management and other things. He's presented his research at several national and international conferences. He's been awarded best papers, and he's also actively performing new product and supply chain development consulting projects and founded a nonprofit that focuses on strengthening female education access in China. Andy's lived in China. He's lived in the United Kingdom, Australia, visited lots of countries, climbed lots of mountains. He received his PhD in management from the University of Durham and his BS in supply chain and operations management from Purple and Gold, the University of Northern Iowa. But none of that is why you're here tonight, is it? I know I'm the provost. I'm the vice president for academic affairs, so I got to talk about the academic stuff. After Andy and his wife, who was pregnant with their first child, summited Mount Kilimanjaro 3 years ago, Andy and his cousin John were invited to join a team to climb Mount Everest. And they considered it for a short time. But the team was going up the south side, which is the easy side. And John and Andy thought, well, if we're going to climb the highest peak in the world, we don't want to take the easy route. We're going to do it on our own and go up the northeast route, which is much, much more challenging. When I sent out this email, I did get a response back from John Steffa. Does anybody know the name? Is he here? He also went up the northeast route, didn't get to the top, but he was in a UNI faculty. For Andy, climbing mountains is not something peripheral. It isn't a weekend pursuit or a hobby. When Andy came to ask permission from me to take a month off of teaching his classes in April so he could go climb Everest, he explained that he had set up his supply chain management classes to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, and then they also met Tuesday, Thursday evening and were working on live client projects with China. So they did many more hours than in the normal semester. And I said, Andy, you don't need my permission. Go climb Mount Everest and come back and tell your story. Climbing mountains is at the core of who Andy is because it represents how he lives his life. Full speed ahead, filled with challenges, brimming with joy and optimism, and service to others. This is always about service to others. Andy and John's Everest trip adopted the cause of supporting veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic disorder stress, because in the end, they know that this isn't about them. This is about something much bigger, and tonight we'll get to hear that story. Andy.
Come on up, John. Come on up. All right, so thank you for that very, very kind introduction, and thank you for organizing this. This wouldn't have happened without your guidance and leadership. So thank you for putting this all together, and it takes a lot of time and energy. Thank you. So first things first, let's give away some stuff. So we had some shirts made beforehand, and we didn't had these made, Iowans Forever shirts, and we sold these to people throughout the state and internationally as well, to help raise money for the veterans, to go on veterans trips and these sort of things. And we have a few extra. So we're trying to liquidate, okay? We're gonna liquidate these things. So we're gonna ask a few questions, and if you get it right, we're gonna throw you a shirt, okay? So first question, what is the height of Mount Everest? 29,028. Who said that? Right back there. All right. You want to run that one up?
Yep.
All right.
What was it?
Mount Everest is on the border of which two countries? China and Nepal. That's right. So Mount Everest isn't 50-50, half Nepal, half China. It's more on one side than the other. It's more on the Nepal side. What percentage of Mount Everest, approximately, is on the Nepal side? Everybody gets a shirt. No. Who said 75? I heard a 75 just now. Yep, great. You do the next one.
I really didn't have a question. I was actually just rock climbing today down a pictured rocks and come up. I was just going to sit here and watch.
I'm putting him to work.
So, can somebody tell me the difference in Sherpa between the capital letter Sherpa and the lowercase Sherpa? Too hard?
Somebody? Anybody give it a guess?
Yep.
What was the answer, John? Can you repeat it?
It's the last name and then the job.
Okay, good. Okay, so, and which is which, John? The last name is the capital S.
Yep.
Capital S is the last name, and the small s is the job. Good. Can you come up with another one?
Anybody know how long we were on the mountain?
6 weeks.
We already got it. Who said it? 52 days. Good job. Right. So our entire trip is 52 days. How long did it take us to go from base camp to the top of the mountain and back to base camp? The whole trip, right? So from the time we arrived at base camp to the time we left base camp. Nope.
60.
It's in the 30s. So if we can get... Did somebody say 38? Anybody say 38? All right, right here. All right. He's a smart boy. I like it. What's another good question, John?
How many Iowans have summited Everest?
Two
Total.
on the north side. Okay.
7.
Oh, lower.
5.
5.
You got it. Good job. Nice job.
And the other 3 have all been in the south side.
Am I? Okay, thanks. Okay. Sorry?
Yep. She was the first woman, and she was just last year.
Phenomenal feat. Phenomenal
Yeah.
feat. And she actually gave me a lot of advice before we went to Everest. I called her on the phone a few times. Jess Loeb from Jessup, Iowa.
So that's one of them. Can somebody name another one?
Did he get a shirt? I don't think we do. I think they're all large.
No?
But I did find out Don Briggs has been on in the Himalayas 8 times. So, nope. Chuck Huss tried several times, never made it. This one person did what they call the World Triathlon. So he swam the English Channel, rode his bike to Everest Base Camp, and then climbed Everest. And he's born in Boone, Iowa, raised in Des Moines. Anybody know who this is? Charlie Whitmack is his name. Yep, Charlie Whitmack is his name. How about another one? What's a typical yak load? So yaks carry a lot of the gear. What do you think? How much do you think they carry at any given time? What do you think?
8,000.
If we're talking ounces, maybe. A yak, 150? A little bit lower.
120.
It was 70, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who said 70? Yeah, up here. Okay.
Where?
Got what? I don't know. I think somebody up here said 70. Okay. Good. We're almost there. We're working our way down. Maybe we could save the rest of them for the end, if we can ask some good questions. Okay. Thank you guys all for coming out today. John's gonna aid me here and there to sort of add some richness and granularity to the story. But for the most part, I'm going to go with slides. And the reason John isn't up here and doing a dual presentation is because he let me know he was coming last night at 10 p.m. So he wasn't originally planning to come. Okay, so today's talk is all about our Everest expedition. So John and I became the first Iowans to climb the Everest's northeast ridge. And we made a special point when we got to the top that we were going to do it together. So we reached the top of the mountain simultaneously. Okay, so we made sure that we set it down, and that's the way that we climb, right? So we climb together. Okay, so Everest. Why in the world would you climb Everest, right? There's so many other things you could do with your life. So I've got this great quote that from George Mallory, one of the real pioneers of Everest. We do not live to eat and make money. We eat and make money to be alive, to be able to live. That is what life means and what life is for. Okay, so if this is what embodies doing these sort of extreme adventures, right? So there's more to life than just the mundane of every day. So you need to get out there and do things to really have a fulfilled and, for me anyway, to have a fulfilled life, right? So with that, we are going to go over the agenda, okay? So first, we're going to talk about how a country bumpkin from Boone, Iowa, I'm from Boone, Iowa, John's from Dallas Center Grimes, how two country bumpkins from Iowa end up climbing big mountains in the world, right? Not your typical feature, right? So, and Boone, Iowa, is anybody familiar with Boone, Iowa? It's in central Iowa, about 13,000 people. I grew up outside of that, right? I grew up in the countryside of Boone, Iowa, so really a country bumpkin. Then we'll move into training, and we'll talk about the divergence paths that John and I took for training. We'll talk about the climb itself, right? So 52 days in purgatory, 45 minutes in heaven. The entire trip was about 52 days, and we spent about 45 minutes on the summit itself. So a very, very long time to be in this very special place for a very, very short amount of time, okay? And then we'll talk about what's next. Okay, so we'll talk about what's next. So, and John can elaborate on what he's doing. I've brought some slides on what people always ask me. You've done Everest. What are you going to do next? Stay tuned. Okay, so how a country bumpkin from Iowa got into climbing big mountains. It actually started for me, and I think John as well, by rock climbing, technical rock climbing. So back when I was in middle school, I got invited on this venture crew trip with the Boy Scouts. We went down to Kansas City to a place called Ibex, and we slept under here. We slept underneath the rock wall, and we climbed. And I thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. I need to do this again, okay? And it just so turned out that there were a couple other climbers in the area in central Iowa, one of which was in Kelly, Iowa, which is very close to Ames, and they built a rock climbing gym in an old barn. This isn't the actual barn, but that barn actually burnt down. But it was something that looked kind of like this, really scary looking place. And we used to go there and climb a lot. And I actually ran into John there a few times before we knew each other in a climbing way, in a non-family way. So climbed there a little bit, and I thought, this is pretty cool, but I don't want to drive to Ames all the time. So one of my best friends from high school and I decided that we were going to build our own rock climbing wall, right? So if you're familiar with a Morton building, these big metal sheds, right? They're really tall. We have one at our house, right? I grew up in the countryside, and we built a really cool rock climbing wall, and we climbed a lot. We climbed a lot. We climbed every day. We got really, really strong. And then one year, we decided to go to Lake Tahoe for spring break. My friend and I, we had no idea how to lead climb. That's where you don't actually have the rope up already. You have to put the rope up yourself. And so we didn't know what back clipping was, for example. We didn't know how to set up a top rope. We didn't know any of the technical sides of climbing at all. But we were really strong. So we went up and we just started climbing, and luckily nothing really bad happened. We were climbing like 11s, and we even tried a 12, 512, which is the scale, and it's really hard. And we didn't really know what we were doing. So we got back. This is not me, even though I may or may not have had a pair of tights that looked like that. After Tahoe, I'd really gotten into rock climbing, but then the mountains started to come into play, right? So the first mountain I ever climbed was Mount Elbert in Colorado. So I convinced one of my friends in high school to go out and, from high school to go out and climb this mountain in Colorado. Neither one of us had ever climbed a mountain before, a 14er, and we went out there and we climbed it, and it was great, and we had a great time. Just went out to climb Mount Elbert. And then then I got into more technical climbing again. John and I climbed Devil's Tower, if you're familiar with that. And our friend Mitch here in the front has also climbed Devil's Tower with us. There's a picture of John and I on our most recent climbing adventure on the top of Devil's Tower. And then I actually ended up riding my bicycle across the U.S. a couple times. Right? So the first time was from Dana Beach, California to Wells Beach, Maine. So I went the long way too, Southern California to Maine, and completely self-supported. So I wanted to make it my own as well. I did the whole thing without sleeping under a roof at night. So I'd sleep in city parks in a tent or under bridges or whatever. I was just fresh out of a very liberal Midwestern university, University of Northern Iowa. So doing these things, and this is a picture of my roommate from college and I after we finished that. And just a little, this is important for the story because this is my first true endurance test, right? So this is the first big endurance event that I ever did. And this helped sort of get into more endurance events after this. So one thing we did while we were on this ride was we ate a lot of McDonald's, right? This seems kind of counterintuitive, right? You're doing all this work, why would you eat McDonald's? But it was a lot of calories, right? And we thought of it as buying air conditioned time. And so when you're going, because it was really hot too, right? So we'd go in there and we'd just sit and eat. And we started like trying to figure out ways to keep it interesting, right? So we came up with this game. It's called the Dollar Menu Challenge. Back then, we had a dollar menu, right? So the challenge is you have to order one of everything on the entire value menu, and you have 1 minute to eat each thing, right? So by the end of the trip, we tried this idea of the Dollar Menu Challenge. Neither one of us succeeded, but it was a valiant effort. We learned our lesson. Neither one of us felt very well after that. So after the bike ride, I ran a few marathons, right? Sort of getting into that idea of endurance sports again. And my first marathon was in Edinburgh, Scotland. I was in grad school in England at the time, so just popped up there for a quick marathon. And then got into, now that we had the rock climbing side and we had the endurance side, now we wanted to put them together to climb pretty cool mountains. So it's not necessarily mountaineering, it's known as alpinism, right? So when you have alpinism, you have technical rock climbing, and you have to get to the mountain. You have to do the physical side of mountaineering as well. So the first time I climbed the Tetons was with John. right? So John and I climbed, and this is from our original climb back several years ago. John probably doesn't even recognize this old ice axe anymore. It's a pretty old one. And then right after I got done with that, I had this plan where I was going to climb. Have you guys heard of the 14ers in Colorado? So these are all the mountains that are above 14,000 feet. I had this wild idea that I was going to try and climb all of them, which there are 53 of them, in a month. So I was just gonna I was doing it, right? So I went down there and I was going up one, coming back down, driving to the next one, going up, coming down, just running up them, right? Going. And I was by myself, right? So I was just hanging out by myself, just doing all this by myself. And I got kind of bored, to be honest. It started to feel like work. So I thought, well, this isn't as much fun. And then I was on this mountain and climbing up, just regular day. I come back down, a marmot had eaten all my food. Right, you guys familiar with these marmots, these big brown things that are in the mountains? It ate all my food. I'm like, screw it, I'm going home. So I packed up my stuff and I drove back to Iowa, right? And I had like 13 mountains left, but so I regret not doing that. And this is actually a great lesson. So I had this goal. I didn't reach my goal because I got bored, right? And that's something you can't allow to happen on Everest. You get bored, you get despondent, and you get sort of dejected from your objective. You sort of get detached from it. And you have to have the grit to continue to press on. Okay, so this was a very, very important lesson for me, that I didn't finish the 14ers. And that was actually incredibly helpful on Everest when we were just bored and sitting around and miserable. Okay. Then after that, I climbed a lot of other mountains, right? So John and I, most of these are with John. This is Gannett Peak in Wyoming. The lower right-hand one is Mount Whitney in Colorado. I think that's one I actually didn't climb with John, which is one of the few. You'll notice we're not roped up on Gannett either. We probably should have been, but John and I have this a couple rules when we climb together. First one, don't screw up and die, right? And if you do screw up and die, don't take your partner with you. So this snow was unconsolidated, not very good snow. So we're like, well, if we fall, there's no way we're going to be able to stop the other one. So let's just unrope and we'll see at the top. So we were breaking trail for each other, and away we went. A lot of other mountains. Kilimanjaro was one of the next ones. So this is a picture of myself, my wife, who has actually had our firstborn son in her belly at that time. She was pregnant, I think, 4 months pregnant or so? Three months pregnant? Yeah, well done to her. And the guy in the green on the right-hand side is John as well. So we climbed that one together along with a lot of other people. And the whole point of this climb was to bring cancer treatment to Africa. So we raised a bunch of money, and they were actually able to buy a lot of the equipment needed, radiation equipment needed, to provide relief to a lot of those suffering people in Africa. It's kind of a cool thing. John and I climbed Denali together in 2014, and this is probably the best mountain to prepare us for Everest. Very, very similar, very remote, and you'd be forgiven if you look at these pictures and say, wow, that looks like the Himalaya, right? The Denali mountain range up in Alaska has a lot of similarities. It's not quite as high, of course, but a lot of stark similarities. So John and I climbed the Denali up in Alaska. And you gotta have a little Panther pride, right? A little Panther pride. So made it to the top without too much issue. Then the summer before, went over to Russia and climbed their highest peak, Mount Elbrus. Went fine, nothing too crazy, not too difficult. Then hopped down to Switzerland and Italy, the border of Switzerland and Italy, and climbed the Matterhorn, which was a really, really fun climb. This is one of those ones that's like the Grand Teton, where it has a mixture of technical climbing and sort of mountaineering, right? So glacier crossings, etc. A lot of fun. Okay. Oh. And then to get ready for Everest, I ran a 50-mile marathon, ultra marathon, and then hit Everest, right? So the point of telling you all this is I didn't go from Boone, Iowa to the top of Everest, right? It was an iterative process, and a process that didn't feel like any great leap at any given time. So it was a little step here, and then another little step, and then another little step, and another little step, and just continuing to press on and take little steps until you get to until you achieve your goals, right? So I've wanted to climb Everest for a very long time. This is one path to get there, okay? So if you're sitting there, you're from rural Iowa or somewhere in Iowa, right, or wherever else, you can do it, right? It doesn't happen all at once, but you can definitely take micro steps, baby steps, and you can make it happen. There's nothing special about the path that John or I took. Okay, so the question about the north side versus the south side. So we'll go over this rather quickly. Get the clicker to work. There we go. This is the south side of Everest. So you can see that base camp is about 5,000 meters. That's a little over 17,000 feet, 17,600 or so. And then you have Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, and then the summit. So on the south side, the reason people have trouble summiting are, one, the technical difficulties that are down here at the bottom, the Khumbu Icefall, and then two, they get physically fatigued on summit day. It's a long summit day from Camp 4 all the way up to the summit. So those are some of the main reasons why people get fatigued. So if you can see this picture of the Khumbu Icefall, there's a person right there in the middle. If you can see that. So that gives you sort of an idea of the magnitude of this. It's really, really, really hard, right? But this really, really, really hard part is actually quite low on the mountain. So you don't have the really hard part and the added the elevation as well to deal with. You only have the really hard part. So that's why some people say it's very slightly easier. I contend that they're probably about the same, to be honest. So this is the south side. This is where you've seen the movie Everest, right? This is where they're crossing the bridges, the ladder bridges and things like this. You know, these crazy ladders, and this is very difficult to do, right? Very difficult to do. You can't see your feet. It's very cold, and it is very difficult to do. So the north side then, right? So the north side looks something like this. So we have base camp, right? A little bit lower, about 17,000 feet, but then we go up to camp, advanced base camp, which you can sort of see over here. And advanced base camp is almost at the same elevation as Camp 2. Okay, so it's almost at the same elevation as Camp 2. So you go from base camp, nothing else there. There's the intermediate camp, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then you're all the way up to advanced base camp. So it gets very high very, very quickly on the north side. And that's sort of the rub. So the north side's a little bit colder, a little bit windier, and all the technical difficulties are actually on the top. So on the north side, it's really steep on summit day. So now you're in the death zone, and the death zone is this area where human life can't be sustained. You're dying every second that you're up there, right? And that's where the technical difficulties lie on the north side, okay? So, and as you can see from the pictures, it's really steep, right? These sort of steep areas. So one of the big challenges on the north side is not falling. So one of the biggest causes of death on the north side is actually people falling, right? It's actually people falling. They just fall to their death, okay? And when you fall up when you're that high, there's nothing else you can do, right? You're there. You're there for forever, right? They can't get you down because it's so steep, it's so hard. So how do you combat that? How do you combat that? You work hard before you go, right? You work hard before you go. So as General George S. Patton has said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, okay? So now let's talk about our training plan. How did we prepare for Everest? Okay, so John and I took two very different paths for this. So I took what I call a legs and lungs approach. Okay, so getting my legs in good shape and getting my lungs in good shape, right? Very, very good cardio stuff. That meant doing ultra marathons and running a lot, putting the treadmill, the incline up, and going with a heavy backpack on. And John did a lot of technical climbing and spent a lot of time at altitude in the actual mountains, right? So a very, very different path. So what this comes down to is really training for an ultra marathon or climbing big mountains like the one in Mexico that he climbed just a few weeks before leaving for Everest, Pico de Orizaba. Right, so this is a typical training week for me. People are always interested, what did you do for training? So it's very difficult to read here, but on Monday, maybe I'd throw a backpack with my son in there. He's about 30 pounds. Put the treadmill on all the way up, the incline all the way up, and I'd do about 6,000 or 7,000 feet of elevation gain. Right, so I'd be walking up this hill. We had a TV down in front of the treadmill. I just put some cartoons on, and my son was happy. Right, so I do that on Monday. The next day, maybe I'd run. Right, maybe in my short run was about an hour. Okay, so 7 or 8 miles, and then I'd do the treadmill exercise again. Wednesday, I was supposed to take a day off, but obviously I didn't. I ended up running that day as well on this one. Usually 1 day off a week. And then on the weekends, I'd run between 20 and 25 miles on Saturday, and then another 15 on Sunday, and then do it all over again the next week. So that was sort of how I got physically prepared to do this. And John, if you want to actually, since he's here, he can actually talk a little bit more about how you prepared.
Well, I didn't just do technical rock climbing. I also did a lot of cardio, probably about 4 days a week of cardio, not to the extent he does. Running that many miles is kind of hard on my little bit older body. So I did do a lot of that, and then I'm very passionate about the mountains. So I'd go out to like Colorado at least once a month. I'd run out to Colorado and try and do some big objective out there where I'd just be up at altitude, moving that way, try and get the advantage by having the body used to being up at altitude and adjusting that way. Yeah, but yeah, still a lot of cardio, a lot of strength training. I mean, just a ton of time in the gym, and it's winter time, so it's a lot of treadmill time. And, even outside, I think that helped too. I mean, I went out and ran a lot this winter outside, which typically I don't because it's cold outside and I don't like being cold.
Okay, so can you tell us about Orizaba?
Oh, well, yeah, this is Orizaba. It's the tallest mountain in Mexico. It's the third tallest mountain in the northern hemisphere, or North America. And I had a friend come up and say, hey, let's go do this. And it's like, well, let me look at it. It's like, 18,000 feet. Yeah, it's it's just over base camp. That'll be good. So went down there and spent a week climbing that. It was about a month before we left for Everest, so I think that kind of helped out. So yeah, it was a good climb. It was very kind of a similar conditions to what we experienced on Everest, kind of long uphill, continuing, going and going and going.
And so people always ask, so which one worked out better? And the truth is, it's probably somewhere in between. So I was in pretty good shape, but I got pretty ill the first few days from the elevation. So spending time in the mountains certainly would have helped with that as well. So probably somewhere in between what we did.
Yeah, I think you recovered much faster from our acclimatization hikes than I did. And I know going up like ABC, that was a drag for me every time. It just felt long and arduous, where I just see Andy just run away up the trail. It's like, well, I'll catch him at the camp.
He wasn't that slow, but he's being modest. Okay, great, thanks. So now let's talk about the actual climb itself. Okay, so the actual climb itself. So 52 days in purgatory, and I think that's and then 45 minutes in heaven. I think this is sort of an apt way of describing this, because it was uncomfortable for almost the entire time, right? So you're just there, and you're miserable a lot. You're miserable a lot. Okay, so we'll talk first about travel to the mountain briefly, then about base camp, the climbing progression, right? So the different camps, summit push, and then we'll keep moving. So when you fly into Lhasa, or Tibet, you actually fly into Lhasa, right? So you fly into Lhasa, and Lhasa's already pretty high, so it's almost 12,000 feet already. So I came in from Iowa, and I hadn't been on a mountain since the previous summer, and so this was a pretty big jump for me. So I was already feeling a bit suppressed appetite, a little bit of a headache, these sort of things, dehydrated, etc. I'm not feeling real great even in Lhasa. But you spend a few days there and you keep going. While you're acclimating, we got to go and see some of the sites. So this is John and I in front of the old palace, back when Tibet was its own country, right, before it was overtaken by China, and we got to see all these different, really cool different sites. Then you go up after Lhasa, after you land, you stay there for a few days, and then you go up about 3,000 feet every day after a few days, or every other day, something like that. So you start here in Lhasa, right, over on the right-hand side, and then you go to Shigutsu, right, there in the middle, and then the day after that, you spend the night in Tingri, right? So you can see New Tingri right there on the map, and then you stay a night there. And this is all to acclimate. So if you went directly from 12,000 feet at Lhasa all the way up to 17,000 feet where base camp is, you'd be very, very ill, right, if you went up too fast. So it has to be a very, very slow process. And then the next day, you go to base camp. And when we got to base camp, we're like, wow, we feel great. Let's go for a hike. And so on the first day, I probably went a little too fast on my hike and a little too far, and came back down to the tent, the dining tent, and was fine at first. And then a few hours later, started to feel really, really ill. And it was all due to altitude sickness. And as a runner, I always wanted to accomplish things quickly. You're racing against the clock. You want to accomplish things very efficiently, very quickly. And on Everest, if you take that approach, you get yourself in big trouble. Okay, so you actually have to take the exact opposite approach to that. You have to do things as slowly as you possibly can. Okay, so and I learned my lesson. When we were in base camp, I was vomiting from the altitude. I had a severe headache, just completely miserable. And if I wouldn't have gotten better by the next day, I was going to have to go down and stay a few days and try and go back up after that, which is a real burden because you don't acclimate as fast after you've already messed it up once. So we got to base camp, right? On the drive to base camp, this is our first time getting to the national park for Everest. And this is a picture of when I first saw the mountain, right? So the first time that I, in person, saw Mount Everest. This is a really special moment for me, right? Something that you trained really, really hard for, something you dreamed about for a lot of years. And now to actually have that all come to fruition and stand there and say, that's the one, right? I'm going to climb that one. It was something really, really special for me. So this is a picture of me and our guide. In Tibet, you're not allowed to go anywhere without a guide. You have to be tied to a guide until you get to base camp. So Chinese local has to take over. And then base camp, you're sort of free to do whatever you want. Okay. Oops. So base camp. The bird's eye view of base camp looks something like this. So you can see a lot of different camps here. This one down here is ours. Okay, so this one down here is ours. This is a Chinese camp. We had the Russian camp. We had the Swiss camp. The Japanese were over here. There was another American group over here. And you can see that it's quite spacious down there, right? So we weren't tripping over each other. And in fact, just a year before, they banned the use of generators at camp, and they ran wired electricity to all the different operators as well. So it's actually very clean, very quiet, and it's very, very well managed. Very, very well managed. So this is a bird's eye view. Zooming in on our camp a little bit more. So we had the dining tent, the cook tent, and then a couple other tents for the Sherpa hangout and gear. And then these are where we slept. Okay, this was the Russian group that we were sharing logistics with, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then over here they put John and I. So they sort of put us off to the side, which is fine. So this is where we were. And sort of taking a little bit of a different view, we can see on the right-hand side of the picture up here, that's the shower tent. Didn't get used very often because it was really cold. And a shower, they had a little stool, and they gave you a bucket of warm water. So it was just in a cup, so just kind of pouring things over your head. So, John, how many showers did you take while you were there?
I'm going to say 4.
Yeah, I think it was 4 for me as well. And we're talking, a long time. So four showers isn't a whole lot.
Yeah, that's 4.
So you can see another view of base camp here. This is the Chinese camp, and this is sort of what we were looking at every day. And some of the other camps, like the Swiss camp, for example, They paid a lot of money for their trip, and they had a foosball table in there. They had a full bar, and John and I didn't quite go that extravagant, but the view from our front door is pretty good, right? So we'd wake up every morning to this. This is our view on a continuous basis there at base camp. Just knock your socks off, gorgeous. This is a picture of the cook tent here and our hangout. So the inside of the dining tent looks something like this. What did we do at base camp? Well, I played a lot of Mario Run, right? So video games, we read a lot. We did laundry, right? So same sort of thing, you're doing all your laundry by hand. You hang it up, so this is hung up between John and I's tents here, right? And you had to do it at certain times of the day. If the sun went down and your clothes weren't dry yet, they froze, right? So they froze. So you had to make sure that you did it at a certain time of day, and it dried in time, right? What we do at base camp, most of the time just spent it feeling miserable, right? So when you're going up to different elevations, your brain sort of swells up, and it gives you a headache, and you're just feeling nauseous. And most of the time, it's not a fun thing to do. It's just getting through it, right? Until your body figures out what's going on, builds up more red blood cells, and keeps going. So most of the time at base camp, we were just feeling miserable, right? So let's take a look at our squad, right? So this is our, so John and I went unguided, right? So we went just with just the two of us, no guide, but we did have Sherpa support, okay? And the Sherpas were incredible. So these guys in the front were the Sherpas, incredible workers, incredible athletes, incredible people. And we shared logistics because for two people to fund a cook tent, and all these different things at base camp, advanced base camp, et cetera, it gets really expensive really fast. So we joined up with a few other teams to share those costs. One of those teams was a group of 5 Russians. It's actually 4 Russians and 1 Ukrainian. And they were guided. So one of their team members was a Russian guy. He climbed Everest 4 different times by 3 different routes. Really a legend in Russia, actually. Very, very good guy. And then another single climber, a guy from Romania who'd already climbed a lot of other big mountains. He'd climbed K2, he'd already climbed Annapurna, and about 8 other 8,000 meter peaks. So really very experienced guy, and without oxygen on all of those. So his plan was to have support to advance base camp, and then above base camp, no Sherpa support, and he was doing it without oxygen as well. And he almost died. He was on knife's edge of dying or living when he got back down to advanced base camp where John and I saw him. What happened with him is that when he went up, he was fine, right? And it took a lot of time, and he spent a lot of time at a very high altitude. Again, no oxygen. And when he got down, he laid down at Camp 1. And this after a long time being up there, he laid down and he couldn't breathe. Like there was no oxygen being processed by his lungs. And so he called his doctor on his sat phone, and he said, there's fluid in your lungs. So, and what happens is it goes down, you can still use a lot of your lungs because only the fluid is only covering the bottom part of your lungs. But when you lay down, it covers all your lungs and you can't breathe. So, and he's exhausted, completely shattered, physically, mentally, completely shattered, right? And so the doctor said, tonight, when you're sitting down, right, you're gonna have to sleep sitting down. If you fall over and you don't wake up, you're not going to wake up. Right, so he was really on that knife's edge of life and death. He did make it down. We had a beer with him to celebrate, and then he went down, but he was a mess. He was a complete mess. And this is an experienced mountaineer who'd climbed, a lot of other big mountains, including K2, right? So I always think K2 is more difficult. He said, well, K2 is probably, without oxygen, is about like Everest without oxygen. They're very similar. It's really, really hard when you go that high. And the last person that we shared logistics with was a French lady. She's lived in Tibet for about 15 years, a devout Buddhist, a very, very devout follower of Buddhism. And she aimed to be the first female from Europe to climb Everest 3 times, okay? And she was successful, And a lot of so Everest on the north side is very clean, is a very, very clean mountain. And a lot of that is due to her. Her big initiative was to clean up Everest. So she worked with the government out of her base in Tibet, in Lhasa, and really put in a big effort. So if I were to say there's one person to thank for Everest being so clean on the north side, it would be her. So it's just a fantastic human being. So that's our team, and then we had all of our Sherpas as well. To give you an idea about the experience of our Sherpas, so the Sherpa that I climbed with, this is his resume, and you can sort of see how incredible of athletes they are. So several summits of Mount Everest and several other mountains. Just an incredible athlete. John, the Sherpa that John climbed with, has an even more extensive resume, right? So I think this year was his 13th time summiting Everest. Yep. 13th time summiting Everest, plus a lot of other mountains. So we had some experience behind us, right? And the reason that you use Sherpa, that you hire Sherpas to help out is, one, because they're just physiologically phenomenal athletes, right? They can do things that we lowlanders just can't do physiologically. And they have a bit of experience on the mountains. So they know if an emergency comes up, how to perform a rescue. So John and I also know how to do that. But if John and I weren't climbing with Sherpas, John gets hurt, it's very difficult to perform a rescue with one person, right? Now if we both have, we're both climbing with a Sherpa, and one of us gets hurt, or a Sherpa gets hurt, now we have 3 people to perform that rescue, and it's a much safer atmosphere for everybody, okay? So very, very good. The only time we really climb with the Sherpas, though, is on the summit push. So the rest of the time, acclimatization and all other times on the mountain, we're really climbing at our own pace, and we had to make our own decisions. And that's part of the idea of being unguided, right? So John and I have enough experience that we felt comfortable doing that. And I should also throw in that John's Sherpa, the Sherpa that John climbed with, smoked like a chimney. This guy was constantly smoking.
Yeah, he smoked all the way up the mountain.
He smoked all the way up the mountain. It's just incredible guy. Just an incredible human being. As nice as you can get. So at base camp, you have to do something called puja. Has anybody ever heard of puja before? They do this in India and a lot of other countries as well. And it's really sort of asking permission to go onto the mountain, asking permission to climb the mountain from the gods, right? So, and this is very, very important for the Sherpas and the climbers as well. So they build this big sort of shrine or whatever you want to call it, and they say a lot of prayers, and they put a little bit of butter that you have to get out your most important climbing gear. So your crampons, for example, your boots, maybe your ice axe, and these sort of things. And they put a little bit of butter on it, say prayers, and have all your gear and everybody blessed. So they believe that if we as people like to consume certain things, then the gods probably do too. Right? So they put a lot of different foods and alcohols and things like this. And this is a picture of John taking a shot of whiskey that had been blessed, for example, before we went up. And then before you go, they wipe flour on your face for good luck. Right? So you can't, this picture's a little bit dark, but you can see they've wiped flour. And everybody has this. Everybody has a little bit of flour on their face for good luck before you go up. So again, a little bit of the cultural side of climbing big mountains. And then you have to take everything, the yaks and the yak herders, take all your gear up to advanced base camp, okay? And it usually is transported on barrels like this, okay? So these hard barrels, and you put all your stuff into it, and then yaks take it up to advanced base camp, and then from there you have to carry it yourself, or you have to have Sherpa support carry it, okay? So anybody have any idea what this thing is? Yeah, it's a toilet, right? So what happens is they take a bunch of gear up to advanced base camp, they empty it out, they put a bag in it, and then they put a little shelter around it and put this thing over top, and that's your toilet, right? So kind of an interesting way to do things up there. And that's required. So, and when it fills up, then the yaks have to carry it back down as well, right? So it's a very clean mountain, and this isn't the case on all mountains. So it's actually a very, very positive thing. Very, very
That was also the only sit-down toilet on the mountain.
Yeah. I didn't venture to sit on it. John did. Okay, so that's base camp. Now let's move on to intermediate camp. So the trek up from base camp to intermediate camp, this is a picture of John here. We're walking behind some yaks. Was long and kind of boring, right? It was about 11 miles in total and about 4,000 feet of elevation gain. Yep. 17,000 to 21. Yeah, so about 4,000 feet of elevation gain. And, oh, sorry, to intermediate camp is about 2,000. Yeah, 2,000 feet of elevation gain. So this is a picture of intermediate camp. You can tell that we're much more tightly packed in. And the resolution isn't very good here, but a lot of those black spots, about half of them are yaks and half of them are people. So in this camp, the people and the yaks sort of coexisted. And that created problems sometimes because the yaks would dirty the water that you're supposed to be drinking. And at one point, we were in intermediate camp, and I was hiking pretty fast that day, so I was well ahead of John. And I got there, and I smelled the water, and it smelled exactly like yak dung. So I was really thirsty too. So I said, oh, I better just dehydrate myself rather than drinking this. And John gets up there maybe half an hour later, and he smells the water, and it smells exactly like yak dung, right? And John says, I'm thirsty. And he drinks a liter of this stuff. I've never seen him more sick in his life, right? So not right away. This is a few days later. Just every ailment you can imagine, John was suffering while at altitude. So we're uncomfortable enough, right? In these very harsh environments, and then you throw on top of that an illness that just makes you violently ill, right? And that's what John had to deal with. So the fact that he was able to persevere and actually climb the mountain, he took some medicine, but he never got quite right after that. Still isn't. Is a true testament to John's grit. I mean, he really had to push hard, and this was important to him, and he followed through with it. So our camp looked, this is right below our camp, so you can see sort of the people and the yaks coexisting. And then our camp itself. So the tent in the middle there with the sign on it is our eating tent. This tent over here is the cook tent on the right-hand side of the screen. This is inside the dining tent. So quite comfortable, actually, not too bad. There's a picture of me. It's a little bit dark. Can't really see it too well. And this is the kitchen. This is where they did all the cooking. It's very, very primitive, but they cook some delicious meals here. So it goes to show, if you have the desire to make something happen, you can definitely do it. They cooked actually over an open fire over here, and created some really good stuff: pancakes, pasta, lots of stuff that we enjoyed. What else did we do at base camp or intermediate camp? We spent a lot of time feeling very uncomfortable. Right, it's very miserable. Lots of headaches, just not feeling well. Okay, then we got to on the way up to from intermediate camp to advanced base camp. So this was probably one of the more beautiful parts of the climb. So we went by all these different giant, crazy structures, right? So this is a mixture of ice and snow, and John dreamed about doing some ice climbing on these, and we never did. But really, really pretty areas. So very much similar to the Khumbu Icefall on the south side, except this one had a nice gravel path going through the center that we could walk through, right? So not dangerous at all. Maybe it would be incredibly difficult to pass without this gravel path that went up to advanced base camp. Really, really pretty up there. And actually, there were even animals up there. This is a dog. Right? So there were dogs running around at base camp. There were dogs running around at advanced base camp. And you might ask, what do they eat? What could a dog possibly eat up there? Well, they'd eat scraps that people would give them. They'd sort of pillage for different things. And sometimes they munched on yaks that didn't make it. right? So we rolled up upon a yak from a few years ago, and that's where they got their lunch, right? So they just forage on whatever they can find. They forage, and we got comfortable enough with this climb going back and forth from base camp to advanced base camp that John and I actually started naming the dead yaks that we'd find along the path. I think this one's name was Robin.
No, that's Chuck.
That was Chuck.
Because it was like,
That was Chuck.
Chuck, what are you doing in the water, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was Chuck in the water. That's right. You're right. Sorry.
Robin was higher up. He was by the British guy.
Yeah, okay, you're right. I'm getting my names mixed up here.
The British guy wasn't dead. We just met a British guy by this one.
Yeah.
His name's Robin. Let me
Yeah.
clarify that.
So you keep hiking and hiking and hiking and hiking, and you finally make it to advanced base camp. And this is what advanced base camp sort of looked like. You have much more tightly packed in. You have glaciated areas all around you, lots of prayer flags, and it was good. You didn't feel like you're on top of other people, but you certainly didn't have as much space as base camp either. And what did we do the first thing when we got up there? We had to show our Iowa pride, right? So this is the flag that you see in the picture, and it wasn't just at camp. We took this one all the way to the top, right? So we'll see a picture of us with this one in a few minutes as well. So other things at advanced base camp, right? So this is where we spent most of our time, right? So this is our common area, our dining tent. These are the people that the Russians that we shared logistics with. And interestingly, even though we shared logistics with this Russian group, we actually never climbed with them, not once. So, but we did share a lot of meals with them. So we got to know them quite well. And this is a picture of where the scraps go. So actually the food scraps, so they have to build a sort of a barrier, and they throw the scraps in here, and the birds come and they pick through it, and away they go. So when you're up this high, they don't have streams to get the water from. Where do you think we got our water? Ice, yeah. People had to go out with picks, right, and mine the ice. And we drank a lot of water. So they'd get these big chunks of ice in these big burlap sacks, right, drag them back up, have these giant pots that were pretty much going all the time to create warm water, right? So they just were constantly boiling more water and constantly going out for more ice. And so John and I were lucky enough that we didn't actually have to go and get the ice ourselves. In all of our other climbs, we had to do that ourselves. On this one, we had the Sherpa support to help us do that. So it made our life much easier on the mountain. Again, those Sherpas, the Sherpas on our team were very hardworking, very, very good people. Okay, what else did we do in advanced base camp? We chatted with friends. So this is a picture of Marion, the French lady. Got to know her quite well. And this is a picture of John and I with Kirill, a guy from Moscow, who will be, he goes all over the world running marathons. He's actually running the Chicago Marathon this October. And we vowed that we're going to run the Boston Marathon together in 2 years from now. So we'll see if that actually happens, but we got along quite well. So at the individual level, we did make some good friendships. But most of the time, we spent it reading, for example, and just feeling miserable. Just completely miserable. So this is another picture of me with my head in my hands, a bottle of aspirin you can sort of see in front of me, just feeling completely and utterly uncomfortable and miserable, right? And you had to go through this every time you went up and you went higher, and even sometimes when you went back down, just being completely miserable. Okay. Once you get to base camp, the Sherpas like to do another puja, right? So they get together. This is not actually our team, but they get together and they do a second puja, asking permission to climb above advanced base camp. Very important spiritually for the people in the Himalayan regions. And then we finally get to climb. Okay, so this is what we call crampon point. And this is where sort of the true climbing starts. So you put on your crampons and you cross this glacier field, right? And then you have this head wall up here. So you can sort of see these little dots here. This is actually John, right? So I took this photo. This is John right here. Here's a closer photo. Again, that's John. And you can tell which groups are guided and which groups are unguided from this picture. So the groups that are roped up, they're very, very tight together. Those are guided groups. So we're talking about like these groups here, right? But when you see a few people here, a few people there, groups of 2 or very, very distant, larger distances, those are probably people that are climbing unguided. Okay, so the majority of the people here on Everest in general were probably climbing guided, and a few people like John and I were climbing unguided. And that's a big head wall. It was pretty steep as well. So you rope up, and you're from the start. You're wearing a very, very big puffy gear, sort of like this, and this will protect you down to like -40 degrees or so, maybe even colder. And then you keep going. So we're roping up, and the fixed rope starts here at the bottom of the head wall, and then it goes all the way to the summit. Okay, different. They link it together, of course, but there are fixed ropes all the way to the summit from there. So this is just a picture of climbing up, and this is a very common thing that we did. So when you're going up these steep places with very, very low oxygen, you do what's called the rest step. So you take one step, and there's so little oxygen in the air that you have to take 5 breaths, 10 breaths, 15 breaths before you can take the next step. So you step, breathe, and then take the next step, and breathe, and then take the next step, and breathe. And you do this the entire way up the mountain. It's exhausting. But if you go too fast, you get sick, right? So actually going slow is not a bad thing. Going slow is not a bad thing. Okay, and then you finally get up to Camp 1. Okay, finally get up to Camp 1. This is a picture of Camp 1. And our Sherpas, again, I can't give them enough praise. They go up ahead of you, and they make sure the tents are set up when you get there, and you have a warm beverage to drink, right? Invaluable. Some soup or some sort of warm beverage. Absolutely fantastic. Another picture of base camp. And where do you think we get our water from up here? Again, we have to boil it all. But now we don't have a big pot that we can boil it in. We have to do it in these smaller batches, right? So you put snow or ice in there, you melt it, and then you do one beverage, and then you do it again, you have some dinner, and you do it again, and et cetera, okay? Again, the Sherpas did the majority of this work as well. This is the first time John and I have ever climbed like this. Usually we do it ourselves, but in this case, the Sherpas did do most of the work. Then you go when you leave Camp 1, you go to Camp 2. Okay, so it's a long slog. This is a long day. So you start out and you go up, and you end up going somewhere over in this black area to the right of the snowfield here, and it takes a very long time. So you're climbing. This is a picture of the Sherpa I climbed with, and the other one's a picture of me. And as you're climbing, you just past Camp 1, you look out, you're at the saddle, you look out, and you get to see Nepal for the first time. And Nepal, it was striking. It was a striking difference. Nepal is so beautiful. It's incredible. Just absolutely stunning. You get this beautiful view. It was a beautiful day, sunny day, not much wind. Really, really good. And then you keep going, right? So you go up and down and over, and you keep going up to Camp 2. And then you get to these tents, and you think, hey, I made it to camp. Nope, it's another 45 minutes up. So our Sherpas decided to put our tents at the top of the camp, right? So we had to go up all these rocks and things, and we're pretty tired at this point, right? Elevation, fatigue, everything. We had to keep going, and they decided to go to the very, very top. Very, very top. So a good, maybe almost 1,000 feet, probably higher than the bottom of base camp. So a long way up. Okay, there's John and Pemba, the Sherpa that he was climbing with. I don't know if he's holding a cigarette there, a little too wide, or if it's giving the peace sign. I'm not sure which one it is. This is the view that we had up there. You can tell it's quite steep, right? It's quite a steep grade there. They actually had to, in the rocks, dig out a platform. They had to sort of dig out a platform and then try to get it flat to find some place to put the tent. There's my tent. This is sort of my backpack, and again, a gorgeous view out the back. Then from Camp 2 to Camp 3. Okay, Camp 2 to Camp 3. So Camp 3 is located in what's called the death zone. Okay, so the death zone starts at about 26,200 feet, which is about 8,000 meters. And like I mentioned before, into the death zone, you can't survive, right? So every minute that you're up there, you're actually dying, right? So you just can't sustain life up there. It's a dangerous place to stay longer than you absolutely have to. So the way it works is you leave Camp 2 in the morning, and you get to Camp 3 in late morning or early afternoon, and then you stay there for several hours, and that same night that you left Camp 2, you leave for the summit. So you just rest in Camp 3 for several hours, and then you do your push for the summit, okay? And then from the summit, you go all the way back down to advanced base camp. So that morning, we got up about 7 a.m., started hiking, right? So we're leaving camp here, started hiking, and continue to go. And it gets a little bit more technical, a little bit more mixed terrain, a little bit more snow and rock mixed in, okay? And it gets pretty steep too, okay? John and I were still feeling really good. We were still passing people. A lot of these people, instead of doing a rest step in 5 breaths, they were doing a rest step in 25 breaths. They were pretty, they were hard pressed to make it. You can see in our backpack here, we've got our oxygen as well, right? So you had your oxygen in your backpack, and then a tube that came down in a fighter jet mask that you wore to get your oxygen. And we're cruising along, and we're getting pretty close. We're getting pretty close to Camp 3, and I see my first dead body, right? So I'm thinking, hey, I bet this is one of the famous ones, right? So because there are a lot of dead bodies on Everest. There are a lot of dead bodies on Everest, okay? So hundreds of dead bodies on Everest. And some of them are quite famous. So I got out my camera, and I snapped a few pictures, and then I got up a little closer, and I noticed that his boots were this year's model. And then it hit me. This is a fresh body. So he had died. It was a gentleman named Frank from Australia. He died just a few hours before we got to him. He had tried to summit the day before and got up to a place called Mushroom Rock, which is still quite far from the summit. Decided he didn't have it in him that day, and he was going to turn around. He was doing it safely. He was using a Sherpa. He was using oxygen, and he got down just below Camp 3, and his brain swelled up, and he died. Just done, right? So so you can't really see it in this picture very well, but so here's the body, and that's camp right up here, right in the middle, right at the end of this snow thing. So only a couple hundred meters away from that, and so this is sort of where I had the biggest mental challenges of the climb. I thought to myself, why am I different from Frank? What am I different from Frank? This is a high stakes game, right? And you don't really, it's a dichotomy, right? So you're either going to live or you're going to die, right? And you don't know the answer to that question until you live or you die, right? And so I thought about it, I thought, why is Frank different from me? He's using a Sherpa, he's using oxygen, he's doing it safely, and his brain still swelled up and he died, right? So what's gonna happen to me? So this was probably the most challenging part of the climb for me. As I said before, it's only a couple hundred meters to base Camp 3. So you get to Camp 3, you're laying there in your tent with nothing to do but think. So you have nothing in the world that you can do. You're just laying there thinking. And the only thing that I could think about was Frank. The only thing I could think about was Frank. So it took a lot of prodding myself and logical thinking and just trying to figure out how I felt about this to continue to go on. Because once you hit Camp 3, you have to be physically prepared. You have to physically prepare yourself for the summit push that same night. You have to be drinking as much as you possibly can. You have to be filling yourself with as much food as you can, even though you're not hungry. And every bite that you take, you get nauseous and want to vomit. And I couldn't do those things because I was thinking about Frank, right? And whether I was going to be the next Frank. So eventually I got to this point and I said, okay, a lot of other people have done it. You trained really hard. You feel really good. You're going to be okay. And only once I got to that point, mentally, was I able to start taking care of the physical challenges that needed to be done as well, right? So there's this great quote from John Krakauer, author of Into Thin Air. He says, this forms a nub of a dilemma that every Everest climber eventually comes up against. In order to succeed, you must be exceedingly driven, but if you're too driven, you're likely to die, right? So where is that line, and how do you stay on the safe side of that line? That's what I had to try to figure out for myself when I was laying there in that tent. So we kept going. As you can see, Frank is still attached to the fixed line. So if you're on one side of the fixed line, you had to literally step over him, right? If you're on the other side, you could just unclip and go around. And then you got into Camp 3. So Camp 3 looks something like this. Very, very steep again, right? Our Sherpas, the Sherpas that we were climbing with. And again, I say they were climbing with because we did see them as equals, as partners in the climb. Went ahead, and they were tremendous. They set up our tents for us and had some hot beverages ready. This one, so here's a picture of our Sherpas setting up the tents. Again, not sure if he's peace sign or just dropped a cigarette. And so my tent on this one, actually the platform for the tent wasn't big enough. So we had this like sort of 2-foot gap on one side. There was just like way down. There was nothing touching. So we had to really, the Sherpa and I had to really snuggle for those several hours. It was a little bit crazy. But we made it to Camp 3, right? We were there. We knew that we had one more really hard day in front of us, and we were going to fulfill our biggest goal of our life, okay? We were to Camp 3. So the push to the summit. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of pictures from our climb from Camp 3 to the summit, and that's because you're so focused, right? You're just focused on climbing, okay? So we did take a couple. So when we're laying in the tent, for example, this is a picture Dawa, the Sherpa I was climbing with, took. So that's me on the right-hand side, just trying to come to grips with the reality of living and existing in this very harsh environment. And what else do you do? What else can you do? Well, we made prayer flags. So this actually stayed on the summit, and the way it works in Tibetan culture is that when every string leaves, they leave it up there, and the wind will take away the different strings. It'll unravel it over time, and that'll continue to send our prayers to the heavens. Okay, so that has his name and my name, Iowa, USA. And this is actually from the climb. So this is one of the few breaks that we took. We took It was several hours we left at about 9:15 p.m. and we each took about 1 liter of water, and I didn't finish all my water. I had about half a liter through that from there back down to Camp 3, maybe 10 hours or so. Yeah. Did you drink your water, John?
Yeah, I got a good liter and a half.
Got a good liter and a half, yeah. So I only had half a liter.
No, liter. Not liter and a half. It was a liter, yeah, because I never got into the liter that was in my pack.
Yeah.
But
so,
the little ones up front, I drank those.
And the reason for that is it's too difficult to stop and to drink. You have to, when you stop, you have to take off your gloves, and you risk getting frostbite. You have to take off your mask. It's just a very arduous process to do that. So you just don't drink much. You don't eat much. You're not hungry. You're just focused on the goal. Even our Sherpa were tired as well, right? Everybody was tired. It's a hard day. Then but you have to just keep going. So this is a picture of the second step, which is probably the most technical part of the climb. A picture of me. You can see it's hard to see from the contrast here, but it's very, very steep here. And in fact, the summit push, the day between Camp 3 to the summit, was the most technically difficult day of the climb. It was quite a difficult day, and John loved it. He was in his element. He said, I get to rock climb and do all these sort of things, and it was a lot of fun. I loved it as well. It was good, but John was really in his element. And then you get to the summit. Right, so this is a picture. This is what it looked like when we got to the summit. We weren't the first group up there. We were the second. And the reason we were the second group, we didn't leave second, but we were flying. right? So we were really moving. We passed group after group after group after group. We were mentally and physically very, very strong on summit day. So when it came down to it, we were able to dig deep enough, put ourselves in a good enough mental and physical place where we were able to excel that day. We weren't even really that tired when we got to the top. It was fine. Like, it was perfectly fine. Felt like just a day out in the mountains in Colorado or something. Well, a little different than that, but yeah, Okay, so we made it to the top, and a lot of people ask me, "What did you feel? What do you feel at the top?" And the answer to that is pure joy, right? Just elation. You're a bit numb because you're not getting enough oxygen. You're in the death zone. You're breathing oxygen, right? But that just elevates where your body thinks it is, lowers where your body thinks it is by about 3,000 feet. Right, so your body still thinks you're really high, right? So you're a little bit foggy, but what do you feel up there? First of all, you don't necessarily feel a lot, and then you feel happy that you've fulfilled your goal. But really, at the end of the day, it's a lot about the process of getting there and everything that had to take place and the learning that had to take place to get there. So getting to the top was absolutely wonderful, but the process of getting there was probably more important overall. So what do you take pictures of when you're at the summit? Well, you take pictures with your friends, right, and your climbing partners. Oops, you take pictures with your sponsors of your sponsor's flag. So Jack's Outdoor Gear in Ames, Iowa was generous enough to donate the sleeping bag, which is a very, very burly, just giant sleeping bag that kept me warm throughout the entire climb. We had John was sponsored by Active Endeavors out of Des Moines, and they have a store in Iowa City as well. Gave him a lot of gear. We also had a lot of support from Marmot. They gave us, for example, these crampons, and they gave us a lot of other gear as well, harness. They gave us ice axes as well. Very, very generous people, so it takes a real village to get there. And also Ames Adventure Outdoors. Ames Adventure Outfitters hooked us up with these down suits, right? A big discount. And so we can't say enough about our sponsors and how much they helped as well. So you take pictures of your sponsors. You take pictures of your spiritual leaders. Okay, so this is Dawa, the Sherpa that I climbed with, and his brother's a monk. And this is the spiritual leader at their temple. So they took a picture of him up there. But and you also take pictures of the things that you think are really important, right? The things that are really special to you, okay? Like the state of Iowa. So we have this flag that we took up. And Panthers mean business, right? So you take pictures of things that are important to you. But mainly just take pictures with your friends, right? And the people that you grew close to over the course of the trip. So this is a picture of John, and again, this is a little bit dark, but John is on the right-hand side here. I'm in the middle. John, the Sherpa that John climbed with, Pemba, is on the right, and the Sherpa that I climbed with, Dawa, is on the right. Pemba's on the left. Okay, and then it's time to go down. Okay, so then you have to go down. So this is what it looked like when we ended up leaving, right? You could tell that we were going so fast. We were so strong on summit day that we got there way before the sunrise. So we actually got to watch the sunrise from the top of Mount Everest, which was pretty neat. It was a pretty neat experience. Something I think I'll probably only get to do once. So we took advantage of that. And that was sort of John's surreal moment up there as well. John sort of put away his camera and just went into the moment and enjoyed the sunrise. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I can talk real quick. So yeah, I had the camera out taking photos and not watching the sun kind of come up. And then at this point, I just kind of, let's try and quit capturing the moment and just kind of live that moment. So like you said, I put the camera down, and for the next 10 minutes where I could have got really great photos, and I didn't. But I did get to see the sunrise. I mean, it just kind of lit up the mountains around you. Everything starts getting that alpine glow, kind of that orange, and then it gets a little bit more color, and the light kind of fades down the mountain. and you're up high enough, there's nothing higher around you, and it's just going down, everything's lighting up. It's just a really spectacular thing, and something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it was really special.
Yeah, and I'm just really happy that I did put the camera down and actually experienced that and just watched it.
I was busy taking pictures. No, I'm just kidding. I watched the sunrise as well. It was neat, but John's experience was really, really special down there. Okay, so you can see by the time we were leaving, it was a mob up there. So yeah, people coming up from the north, people coming up from the south, and the summit of Everest is actually pretty small. So I'd say it was sort of from here to the end of the table, maybe, not that big.
About the size of the table.
Maybe the size of the table is more accurate for the size of the true summit, right? So, and there are a lot of people trying to elbow their way up there. So we ended up going back down. And again, from the contrast isn't quite right on the projector, but you can see that it's very steep there. It's very, very steep. So going up is difficult on steep terrain. Going down is equally, if not more, difficult on steep terrain. So we had to be pretty careful. And in fact, the French lady, we did end up climbing with her on the summit day. She fell a couple times, right? So she's attached to the fixed line, and John actually had to help her up a couple times. If she wouldn't have been hooked in or she was doing something else, it would have almost certainly spelled death, because it's really steep there, thousands of feet down. Okay, this is the second step. Again, the most technically difficult, so this is a really, really steep, technical, very difficult part of the climb. And so in the 1970s, some innovative Chinese climbers brought a ladder up there. And they bolted onto the side of the wall. They said, this is going to make it easier. And it did, right? So going up and down. But you can see that the top of the ladder doesn't actually make it to the top of the cliff. Okay, so the top of the ladder doesn't actually make it to the top of the cliff. And this is probably the most uncomfortable part of the climb for me. So you have about 4 feet, maybe more, at the top that you have to sort of kind of scale up. And you're in your crampons, these metal spikes on your feet, and you're trying to claw into the rock, right? And find handholds with your mittens on. And in the back of your mind, you know that several of the people have died here. Okay, so going up was okay. There are ropes that you can sort of grab onto, but going down is where most people have the trouble. So they'll be going down, their foot will slip or whatever. You're still hooked into the rope, right? But the next point of contact is the top of the ladder. So what happens is you fall and you get flipped upside down. And when you're upside down, your oxygen tank gets ripped off and it goes thousands of feet down the mountain, right? Because it's on a sheer cliff. And a lot of people get their feet wrapped up in the ropes, and they find it very, very difficult to rescue people from that. So you've got this in the back of your mind that a lot of people have died here before. Not a lot. Several people have died here before, and you have to sort of try and make your way down this after being tired, right? While you're tired. So I made it down. That was, if you're a rock climber, it's the same feeling you get when you're above your last point of protection. And you know you're going to take a big fall if you do end up falling, and maybe even, and it could be very bad, right? So it's that same feeling that I got, okay, there. But what do? You have to keep going. The French lady, who had already climbed this 2 other times, felt so uncomfortable with this, she took a rope from previous years and sort of rappelled down the 4 feet to the ladder. So this rope, which has been in the bad weather for a whole year, and it's a terrible idea, but she didn't feel comfortable doing it, even though this is her 3rd time summiting Everest. John didn't have any trouble. He just kind of sauntered on down. He's a much more talented technical rock climber than I am. So I am a technical rock climber, but John is far better.
It was fun.
Yeah. Then you get down lower, right? And you're feeling good, well, kind of. And with every step you take down the mountain, there's a little bit more oxygen. Every step you take, a little bit more oxygen, and your body is happy, right? So, and because John and I, we climbed so fast, we were so strong, and we didn't have to turn our oxygen up very high on our summit push, we had an entire bottle of oxygen left over. So what did we do with that extra bottle of oxygen? We put it in our pack, cranked it up to the highest level of flow, put it on, and just flew down the mountain. We used all our oxygen. We just put it on up to, they have different levels of liters per minute of flow, and we put it up to 5 and just went right down the mountain. It was great. And then we made it down, right? So then we made it down. So those are the different stages of the climb, but it doesn't actually take place sequentially like that. You don't go from camp 1 and then you go to camp 2, then you go to camp 3, and then you go to the summit. It doesn't work like that. So the way it works is you actually drive into base camp, which is at 17,000 feet, and then you go to intermediate camp. Intermediate camp is about 19,000 feet, and then you go back down to base camp, and you rest for a few days, and then you go back up to intermediate camp, you rest there a day, then you push up to advanced base camp, you rest there for several days, and then you go up to camp 1, and you touch camp 1, and you go back down, sleep at advanced base camp and then stay there for a few more days, then go back up to camp 1 and sleep there overnight, and the next morning push up above toward camp 2 as far as you go for a few hours of climbing, and then all the way back down to advanced base camp, stay there for a few days, and then you go back down to base camp, wait there for several days, and then on the summit push, we went up to intermediate camp, stayed there for a night, went up to advanced base camp, found out the weather wasn't going to be very good, went back down to base camp, right, and then waited another week, went up to advanced base camp, and then we went up to the camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, summit, and then from the summit the same day all the way back down to advanced base camp, next day all the way back down to base camp. Okay, so it's not this idea like in Colorado you just go up and you come back down, you go up and down, 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 up and down. And the reason for that is because if you go up too fast, then you die, right? So you go up slowly. So you have to go up, you have to build up red blood cells, right? And just get your body used to the elevation. Okay, used to the elevation, which is a very, very uncomfortable thing to do, as I've already sort of pointed out a lot of times. Okay, so it looks like this. I don't think we need to go up. This is sort of our sequence of the days that we did things in the different points. So I planned this out pretty well. So I'm definitely a planner. So this is our original plan. We didn't actually stick to this plan. You have to be a bit more flexible, but this was our original plan. So why do we do it? Why do we climb mountains? You don't get anything from it. You don't get rich. You don't. There's really no reason to climb mountains. So why do we do it? It's a very strange thing to do. In fact, if you really dig down into the depths, right? But I think this again by George Mallory. This quote really captures it, right? When you go up there, we haven't vanquished an enemy, none but ourselves, right? Have we gained success? That word, success, means absolutely nothing at the top of a mountain. That word, it just has no meaning, right? It doesn't mean anything. But have you won a kingdom? No, and yes, right? So you've achieved ultimate satisfaction and fulfilled the destiny. Right? And that destiny is defined by no one but yourself. So whatever your destiny is, and it doesn't have to be rock climbing to achieve this sort of thing, or mountain climbing to achieve this sort of thing. You can achieve this in many, many different ways, right? But why do we do these things? It's for ourselves in the end, right? It's a very personal thing. Sure, you're trying to help other people and all this, but at the end of the day, it's about self-development. Okay, so people often ask me, what's next? You climb Everest, what are you going to do next? Well, I'm glad you asked. So there's this event called the Leadman. So originally, I was going to just do what's called what is a 100-mile running race in the mountains of Colorado next summer. And which is a very, very difficult thing to do, right? And then I got to reading a little bit more, and I said, hey, they have this thing called the Leadman. You can do 5 events in the mountains in Colorado, 5 different athletic events, all running or biking, and you could get what's the Leadman designation. So what this consists of is you do a marathon in June 16th, then you do a 50-mile ultramarathon, a run, and then a 100-mile mountain bike race on the 11th. The next day, you do a 10K, and then the next weekend after that, so you have like 5 days rest, you run a 100-mile race in the mountains. So it's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And with the mountain bike race and the run, they have two different categories. So this is what it looks like when you're running the Leadville 100. They have these belt buckles, and this is your prize. So if you run the 100-mile race in under 25 hours, you get a big belt buckle. If you run in under 30 hours, but over 25 hours, you get a regular size belt buckle. I'm not interested in the small one. Another pretty crazy event that I'm sort of toying around doing is called Nolan's 14. And I've only recently learned about this. It's this 60, you have 60 hours to complete this. It's 100 miles on foot, so 100-mile run again, and it goes over 14 summits of 14 mountains that are 14,000 feet high, right? And you have a total of 90,000 feet of vertical gain over these 100 miles. Yeah, it's a lot, right? So these are the mountains that you summit. And so you take this sort of path. You start up here at Mount Massive, right? And you work your way down and all the way down to the last one down here. Big one. Very, very few people have actually ever completed this successfully. I think it's probably less than 20, right? People who've ever actually completed this. I'd like to do this someday. John and I have talked about, I haven't mentioned the car-to-car part, but John and I have thought about doing the Grand Traverse. So this is a summiting 10 of the Tetons, the Tetons out in Wyoming, 10 of their most important peaks. Rock climbing, there's some technical rock climbing up to, if you're familiar with rock climbing, 5.8, which is a sort of a moderate grade. 10 to 20 pitches, depending on how much you rope up, and about 12,000 feet of elevation gain. So this is a picture of the Tetons. Really, really pretty mountains out there. A lot of fun. This is the route that it goes to. And I'd like to try and do it car to car. And what that means is you do it all in one push. I haven't talked to John about this, so he's just learning that we're going to do this. So, sorry, John. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So do it in one push. It's usually takes people 3 to 5 days, but we could try and do it in a day. Another thing that John and I have kicked around for a while now is climbing big walls out in Yosemite. And I'm not in good enough technical rock climbing shape right now, but I could be, to do, for example, El Capitan, the nose, right? So you might be familiar with this climb. The first time it was free soloed was recently, and that's rated at 514A, which for rock climbers, that's like a smooth wall, right? It's really, really, really hard. So that's the route up it. John and I have talked about this before. So it takes like 5 days, right? And you're sleeping on the mountain, on the cliff face. So you bring what's called a portaledge, and you're actually sleeping on the cliff face, and then you go up and up and up and up. So either doing that or possibly Half Dome, the northwest face, which again is if you ate it is 5.9, which is fine. It usually takes 3 days, and it'll probably take us 3 days as well. 23 pitches, 2,000 feet of elevation gain. Oops. So you're going to climb the flat side of Half Dome. I've climbed the other side a lot of times, right? Several times. Now we want to do sort of the flat side there. And there is the actual route on the regular northeast or northwest face. So I don't know when that'll happen, but maybe we'll venture into that realm as well. Some big wall type stuff. The last thing that some people ask me about, you've already done 4 of the 7 summits. Why not do the next 3? So the 7 summits are climbing the highest mountain on every continent. And I've already got 4 of them, right? I've got Everest, Denali, Kilimanjaro, Mount Elbrus, and the ones that I have to go are Aconcagua, which is in South America, and Mount Vinson, which is in Antarctica, and then the one in Australia or Indonesia, depending on which list you prescribe to. This is something that I'm kicking around doing. I don't have a strong interest in doing it as much as I used to. I used to think this is a really hard, really cool goal, but after Everest, these other mountains are kind of like, okay, well, yeah, I guess we could go do it, but really, it's not as exciting as it once was. So again, but the cool part about the 7 summits is it takes you to different places in the world that I never would have gone otherwise. So going to Russia last year, I didn't have any plans to ever go to Russia, but I found myself in Russia climbing mountains and seeing what Russia was like. Really pretty place where we were. I probably may or may not go to Argentina or Chile, right? If not climbing Aconcagua. And I certainly probably wouldn't be going to Antarctica unless to climb Vincent. So it could potentially take me to places where I haven't been before, which is highly appealing. So why do we climb mountains, and what are we going to do? The reason that I climb mountains is to learn, right? To learn about myself. And the way that I learn best is to struggle, right? So another George Mallory quote, to struggle and to understand. So why do I climb mountains? To struggle and to understand. Nevertheless, without the other, such is the law, right? So anything that's worth doing is probably going to be hard. It's going to be very, very difficult. But if you take a very incremental approach to this, right? You start out a country boy in Iowa, you can slowly make your way up to climbing the highest peaks in the world. Okay, that's it. Questions? We can. John, why don't you come up as well? Yeah.
You have a young family. How do you justify putting yourself in mortal danger with a young family?
There's no justification for that. So the question was, I have a young family. How do you justify putting yourself in danger, in harm's way, knowing that you have people that count on you back home? And there's really not a good explanation for that. Climbing is ultimately a very selfish act, and I've recognized that. So when I left for Everest, we had a 2-month-old baby. And when I got back from Everest, 2 months later, I had been around our new son for less than half of his life. So I had to put in a pretty big effort to actually get to know my son because I'd been away so much and concentrating so hard on achieving this goal. So it's a great question, and there isn't a good answer besides you have to be selfish, and and some people lose out when you do that. Yeah.
Notice you liked George Mallory's quotes.
Because he's awesome. No, he didn't make it. So George Mallory was one of the real pioneers of Everest, climbing in the early 1900s, and he was climbing from the north side as well. He's a real hero of mine, a real pioneer. Yeah, he died on Everest, though.
My
Yep.
question to that, using these quotes for looking at the value of life, between the two of you, did you set up any fail-safe criteria between the two of you, no-go, go decisions that you were going to try to stick to as you attempted this?
Want to take that one?
Um,
So the question was, did we have any fail-safes? If we didn't hit this point by this time, for example, or if we weren't feeling well or something like that, then what was going to happen?
like on summit day, we started early enough. We really didn't have like the turnaround time that they talk about in the movie. For us, it was more about the weather, but we had I'll hold it up higher. Had really great weather that day. I mean, we got up to like a balmy, -20 or something and no wind. So it was a great day on summit day. But there were times, like on our acclimatization schedule, the first time we were going up to the North Col, I got a tightness in my chest. I didn't feel good. So at crampon point, I looked at Andy. It's like, hey, I'm done for the day. I'm turning around going back down. He was still feeling good. He went up and slept the night at the North Col. I did not. I had to make up that day at a later time in the trip. So we kind of internalize, and we have very honest and frank conversations with each other. I mean, that's kind of the great thing about climbing with each other. We do care a lot about each other, and we monitor each other really closely. So if you're acting abnormal or something like that, we're honest with each other, going, "Hey, John, you're not looking quite right. Why don't you take an extra rest day?" We've done that many times, and it's just worked out well. So we just kind of rely on each other.
That's right. Yep. So we're each other's fail safe. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Do you know anything about like the green boots and those people?
Yeah, so the question was, do we know anything about the green boots and those people? So green boots is one of the famous dead bodies on Everest that I thought I was taking a picture of when I came across Frank. And so there are a tremendous amount of hundreds of dead bodies on Everest, and when you see those as a climber, it really has a negative impact on you. So a few years ago, and the Chinese government understands this, and so a few years ago, they made a big push to clear the dead bodies. They can't get them back down, right? 'Cause it's too dangerous. The people taking them down, it's too steep. Too many bad things can happen. But they tried to get them out of the line of sight, out of the view of the people that were climbing, off the path, if you will. So they took a lot of these bodies and they found a big crevasse, and they threw the bodies down in the crevasse. And so when you're climbing, you can see from our suit that you wear really bright colors. Right, so like reds and yellows, and this is so you can see it against the snow, and you can see a different contrast. So when they threw all these dead bodies in this big crevasse, they now call it Rainbow Valley, actually. So a little bit morbid, but Green Boots is now covered up. Yep, he's no longer visible. Yep, another question? Yeah.
How much did you study the physiology of altitude and the cold and nutrition and that sort of thing?
So the question is how much did we study the physiology about and the nutrition and things like that of high altitude? I did talk to an ER doctor named Chuck Huss, who has been on Everest 4 times, and he gave me a lot of very valuable insight about what to expect, what to look for, what to do, and really his advice is very, very valuable to me personally throughout the climb. And maybe you had a different experience.
I didn't talk to Chuck, but yeah, basically it's a lot of my personal experience, see what works for you, because everybody's kind of different, so what happens to you at altitude changes a little bit. For us up at altitude, like at Camp 3, I know I still had my appetite, I was still able to drink well, and I think that really helped us on Summit Day. We were able to move because most of the time a lot of people don't eat and you don't drink, so you're dehydrated, you don't have that energy, but I was happy and I was eating and drinking, doing okay.
Yeah, me too. Yep, we had an appetite. Yeah, question? Let's go over here. Yep.
Speaking more about the nutrition, do you try to get yourself in nutritional ketosis for when you're going up to the top?
So the question is nutrition. How do you get enough calories? Is that the basic premise?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but nutritional ketosis is where you switch over to using fat instead of sugar, and you use more. Your body is able to use more oxygen and get more energy from the fat than from the sugar.
So the question is sort of how do you get your body to start using fat rather than the sugars? And this is a really, really complicated question, and probably I'm out of my depth answering this. But so I did a couple different things. When I would go on my long runs, I would, if it was under 15 miles, then I wouldn't take any food or water with me. And so my body really got used to doing these very, very extreme endurance events and not expecting anything in return. So I trained my body to be able to do that. But when you're that high, your metabolism really, really slows down. So you just kind of wing it, really, at the end of the day. You try to do your best, but John, you're more of a wing it guy, aren't you?
I ate bacon.
Yeah, and I'm a vegetarian, right? So it's a contrast. Yeah, good question. Yep, yeah.
Do you need to get a permit to do that? And then an auxiliary to that is, you mentioned a lot of people. How many people attempt this, and what percentage are successful?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So yes, you do have to get a permit, and it is expensive. It's like 11 grand just for the permit, right? Climbing Everest is a really expensive thing to do. And so you do have to have a permit. And what was the follow-up?
You mentioned you photographed, there's a lot of people doing it.
Oh, right, so the success rate.
How to do it, and what percentage actually are successful?
this is actually one of the things that pushed us to go to the north side. So on the south side, they had a record number of Sherpas and clients this year at about 1,200 Sherpas and clients. And there's only one route up, right? So you have all these different people. And John and I said, that's pretty dangerous. You can get in big trouble and not have it be any fault of your own, right? On the north side, the Chinese government has done a very good job managing Everest and the permits and everything. They did a study, and they said, we think about 400 people is the max that we'd feel comfortable with climbing up and down the mountain. And this year it was 372 clients and Sherpas. And I'm not sure about the success rate, and that varies from year to year. But to give you an idea, there's about a 10% attrition rate even before the summit push. Even before anybody summits, about 10% of the people give up and go home, and then you get some percentage of that which are ultimately successful.
Temperatures on top.
Cold. I make the joke at being a balmy -20, but I didn't have a thermometer with me. I didn't really pay attention to it. I know there was no wind, and it was warm. You see it in a lot of my photos. I had my hood down. I was able to move without that, because the wind is really a deciding factor in the temperature there. And then once the sun comes up, you're so high, the radiation, the solar radiation warms you up. A lot of times at like base camp, we'd be down to like shorts, just kind of hanging out because it's too hot. It was very uncomfortably hot to be in your tent during the day. You'd actually have to get up and go to like the dining tent or somewhere else to cool off.
Yeah, the temperature swings were huge. So we did measure the temperature in the tent one day, over 100 degrees. Right, during the day, and then once the sun goes down, you're down to -20. So we're just having these wild. So you'd be sitting there sweating in your boxer shorts, right? And then half an hour later, you're wearing, like down suits. You're wearing all your down clothes. Really wild temperature swings. Yeah.
Curious, at any point did you guys come to kind of a reality that you weren't going to make it? And if so, how did you work through it?
No, I never felt mentally or physically that I couldn't make it. No, physically I felt like it was game on the whole time. John maybe had a slightly different experience. I don't know.
I did, maybe 2 or 3 times. When I drank the yak water, it's a good lesson learned. If it smells like yak dung, don't drink it. In my defense, I did put tea in it and some honey, trying to make it taste better. It did not help, but I got exceedingly sick. Probably one of the most sick I've ever been in my life. A fever. I assume we didn't have a thermometer, but I was running a fever, chills, vomiting. For the rest of the trip, this was early May, so the whole rest of the trip I was eating ammonium and Prep-Termination H, and that didn't even really slow it down too much. Ammonium D, it was bad. And at that point where I'm that sick, it's like, I'm gonna have to leave. I've ruined my whole Everest trip because I drank some bad water. And then there's a couple other times where you're just trudging up there, and I don't feel like I was acclimating well enough. I'd see Andy just run up the trail, and I'm slowly just kind of trudging along. And it crosses your mind. It's like, man, maybe I'm not in good enough shape. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I just can't do it. So there were moments of doubt, and just to overcome it, it's like, well, I'm just going to keep going. I may not be as fast as Andy, but I'm slow and steady. I just keep trucking along, and I'll get there eventually. And but like Summit Day, as Andy said, that was the funnest day for me. I actually got to do some rock climbing. I was smiling underneath my mask. It was fun.
John was super strong on Summit Day, like incredibly strong. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Question. Let's go over here. So for in preparation for the climb, so the question was what was the most, if you could single out one thing to be the most important thing that you did to get ready for the climb, what would it be? And I'd actually, I'm going to extend it to two because they're slightly different. So the first one would be climb Denali, right, unguided. So getting experience on a big mountain that's very remote and you're relying on nothing but yourself. That puts you in a very good, if you're successful there and you have all the skills necessary to do that, that puts you in a very, very good position to be successful on Everest as well. Because you don't find yourself relying completely on your Sherpa support. You don't find yourself relying on a guide or whatever else. So that was a very, very important thing for us to do. The second thing for me was the ultra marathon right before. So 5 weeks out, I ran that ultra marathon. I got really tired at times, and you just have to keep going. Right? The mental side of it is there as well. So you get tired, you have to keep going. That body caught me off guard, right? I knew it was, Chuck Huss told me, I asked him, how can I get mentally prepared for this? He's like, he told me, he looked me in the eye and he said, you're going to see death when you're on Everest. You need to prepare yourself for that. But I'm an academic. This isn't something I can prepare for very easily. John is a seasoned seasoned war hero. So a few different tours and this, so it didn't impact him the same way. So yeah, how did you go for it?
Mental preparation for this, just like I said, I went to the mountains a lot and just kind of acclimated myself. I mean, cold's a big factor in that, so I spent a lot of last winter out dressed where I shouldn't be, dressed down a couple layers, so I was cold. That way I built up that mental kind of tolerance that it's cold, but it's not going to kill me cold. So you just kind of get that attitude. And, really what helped me on the mountain, we had a satellite communication device, this little thing that could send text messages. And being able, well, it wasn't a satellite phone. It was actually just a little device, and you could text. And I could text back to my wife if I was having a bad day, going, hey, having a bad day. And she'd text back, hey, you can do this. We got you. We're supporting you. And so that was kind of a big mental boost for me on the trip.
Great, thanks. Yeah, other questions? Yeah.
How has doing something like this changed how you interact with people now, or changed how you just go through your life?
Well, now my good climbing partner is known as the guy that climbs with the guy that climbed Everest. Actually had stickers made up to say such. I won't point the guy out sitting down here in the front row.
Yeah, we can move on. Yep.
Have you ever seen someone fall to the ground and not really breathe, or fall on their knees and then fall on the ground?
Yeah. So the question was, did we see anybody fall, take a real fall on the mountain? And no, I don't think we did.
No.
A big fall. So.
Yes, we saw some really big avalanches up in Alaska, to be honest.
Yeah,
Huge.
big ones that were man-eaters for sure. So yeah, good question. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, so the finance side of it, that's a great question. It's a really important question. We worked hard and saved our money, and maybe even took out a few loans to do it, and this is something that was important to us, so we just found a way to make it work. I didn't catch that. Can you say that again, please? Yeah, so that's a great question. So the equipment that we needed was really expensive, and we had to get that as well. And that's why these sponsors and really having the climbing community coalesce around or come to our aid was really important. So like a pair of crampons, a couple $100. A pair of climbing boots, $1,000. This climbing suit, $1,200. Right? And this adds up really, really quickly. And these are just 3 items, right? And you use these only on these really high mountains. So we're never probably going to use this stuff again. Or, I don't know, maybe John will. But
Yeah, I've used my crampons since then.
well, the crampons, sorry. Yeah, so yeah, good question. Yeah.
When did you really just dream of Everest, and when did you decide that someday you were going to do it out there?
Yeah, so I think those two things came at different times for John and I. I've had Everest in my mind for a long time. I always told people I'm going to climb Everest by the time I'm 35. I just turned 34, so I succeeded there. I don't know the exact point when I wanted to climb Everest. Maybe it was when after I graduated from UNI. I was working in the corporate world, and I got a little bit disenchanted with the corporate world. It wasn't very fulfilling for me. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And so I made a list. One night after work, I made a list. If I could do anything in the world, what would I do? And the first one was learn Chinese. So I quit my job, and I moved to China, and I studied Chinese full-time. The second one on the list was to get my PhD. So after I was proficient in Chinese, I went to grad school. And Everest was in the top 5 of that as well. I can't remember exactly where on the list it was, but I just decided, let's dream big. If I could do literally anything in the world, what would I do? And climb Everest was certainly on that list. So you have to figure out a way to get there. Yeah, John. Yep.
Yeah, guy in the back.
Here's much about these Sherpas. I mean, they have a physiological advantage to us, low advantage. How are they able to do this so consistently so often?
So the question was, is there a physiological advantage that the Sherpas maintain? Do you want to take it?
The quick answer is yes. They're born, raised, they live up at altitude. Most of them come out in Nepal. So it's a very high altitude, about 15,000 feet is kind of the low elevation for a lot of them. So they're just naturally there. So their body is produced over the generations, produce more red blood cells. Okay, and typically they're a little shorter in stature, which is actually an advantage in high altitude mountaineering. We're actually not great physiologically designed to be mountaineers because long and skinny is not what you want. You want to be kind of shorter. So the blood traveling down to your extremities with skinny arms gets colder quicker than if it's a shorter arm, shorter, thicker arms. So they do have some natural adaptations that they've developed over time.
We were fine though. And another thing to train for the Sherpas, I asked my climbing Sherpa, what did you do to prepare for this? He said, oh no, I just sort of showed up. Wow, yeah. Jim, did you have a question? No. One more, last question, sure, yeah.
Just a question of longevity. All of us, or many of us, will exercise on a regular basis for years and years. And we're hoping to kind of extend our life or extend the healthiness of the life that we have. So you guys put yourself under tremendous trauma where there could have been things actually destroyed. I'd like for you to just tell me whether you feel that way. Do you feel ultimately that you might have extended your lifespan or the healthiness of it, or in fact shortened because of that enormous?
So the question was, when you're up at living in these extreme environments for extended periods of time, are you doing your body harm or are you doing your body a favor in the long term? And will this ultimately extend your life or will it ultimately shorten your life? I think probably stress and happiness are probably a lot more important than the physiological factors of the times, a couple months in Everest. So being successful, having been successful on Everest, and coming back and living a healthy life and doing things that are productive and keeping moving, I think maybe there was a negative effect, I'm not sure. Actually, I am sure. There was a negative effect, right? So, but will that shorten my life? I don't think so. I think there are a lot of other factors that are probably more important. Did you want to give your thoughts on that?
No, I'm good. I not really extending my, I hadn't really thought about it. What the long-term physiological effects will be on my body, but more bacon. Bacon's good for you. I believe living actively and healthy, objects in motion tend to stay in motion, objects at rest tend to die. So, I know in my philosophy, I just keep going. I took a couple weeks off once I got back from Everest, kind of healed up a little bit, and then, got back out there and, doing what I love, being outside and, climbing.
Yeah, the last thing that we'd like to mention is we are still doing, as a preparation for this, we were taking veterans on trips, as Jim briefly mentioned, and we are continuing that. So if you do know any veterans, and we've had a few veterans here actually that have been on trips with us. So if you know of any veterans that would like to get out into nature, we'll be having, I think the next trip is in October. Yeah. So send us an email. Find us, and we'd be happy to take you out. Thanks.
Andy said this, a night like this, a climb like that doesn't happen without a village. And I want to mention a couple people, Keith Kennedy in the back, Laney running the cameras, all the students, Joe Marchesano, they gave up their night tonight to be able to have the wonderful slides and then to beam this across the world. So thank you to all of them. Thank you to Pat Wolber in the Provost's office to help with the arrangements. And thank you to the College of Business Administration. Leslie's here someplace. Excellent. I tell you what's amazing to me and remarkable and why I'm so honored to be part of this institution, it does take a community to figure out how to support faculty, staff, students to do these remarkable things, and the College of Business Administration provided a remarkable amount of support. Thank you all so much for coming, and let's give one more hand to the climbers.